All right. Douglas Murray. Remember him? You've never been? This is one of the guys who say, like, we got to trust experts. And look, I get it. If there's a person who's an expert in a field, I'll defer to them. For example, if there's somebody who is a medical expert or someone involved in engineering, electricity, plumbing, I'll defer to them, right? Because, experts, right? But when it comes down to, history, politics, understanding current events, what we here at Hard Lens Media encourage all of you to do is do your own research. Simple as that. Do your own research. That's all. Do your own research. Do it. Question and challenge everything. And what I'm proud of when I look at this audience, I have conservatives, I have libertarians, I have progressives, I have independents, I have Greens here. And the thing is, Douglas Murray ate some humble pie. And so Dave Smith went on Tucker Carlson's show to talk about his debate, the breakdown of it. And I think it's important that we hear from Dave Smith because Douglas was on the warpath to try and silence and suppress. Well, I wouldn't say silence and suppress. Let me take that back. I guess try and do damage control on what happened on Joe Rogan's show. So let's play this.
Dave, I'm really glad to see you. I know you've been here before. But it's nice to have you back.
I am an expert in all things Tucker Carlson.
So, I know you've been asked this a million times, but I'm coming to this late. How do you assess the debate that you had with Douglas Murray? Now, it's been a month. How long's it been?
Something like that.
Something like a month, right?
Yep.
So,
a few weeks.
Looking back, what was that?
Hold on, let's fast forward that. Let's fast forward that a little bit.
Fox News show was that Bill Burns,
later director of the CIA, yes,
the CIA director through Joe Biden's 4 years,
yes,
who was the CIA director through.
Apologies, I realized I might have fast forward just a little bit too much. Sorry about that.
Radar. If you have trained so much more, if you have all these advantages against me, well, then you can't just you have to demonstrate that. Take on the argument. You should be able to then destroy me. And so he weirdly opened with this thing where he was going to turn everybody off, turn everyone against it, because the style is bullshit. Even if you're, and I've had lots of people who are pro-Israel reach out to me since then and be like, listen, I disagree with you on the issue, but that was ridiculous the way he attempted to argue. Because weirdly, number one, you're turning everyone against you. And number two, you're just setting the bar so much higher for yourself. Because now once we start actually getting into the debate, you've already explained that you should be dominating me on every facet of this, and yet you're not. And yet actually when it comes down to it, you have no answer for the points that I'm making. And that was the theme of,
of
the entire
knowledge either.
Yes, that's right. But there were 2 points in the debate that actually stuck out to me the most. And it wasn't the have you been, which is, was the funniest thing that everyone's making, that, Douglas will be mocked for eternity for, but he made his own bed. But the 2 points to me that really stuck out in the debate, because this is the way my mind works, is that I'm like, oh, if you give me something, give me something to challenge me on, that will actually keep me up at night, by the way. If you were to be like, no, Dave, you got this completely wrong, and you need to read these 3 books to understand why you're missing all this information.
Can I interrupt and say, knowing you pretty well, I think, I mean this, I believe, I would take a lie detector test and pass. I believe that if you read those books and found that you were wrong, that you would admit it.
Oh yeah, and I've done this lots of times before. I have views from a decade ago that are quite embarrassing in hindsight. I was an atheist at one point.
So let's go ahead and pause here. I want to pause here just because I don't want to be doing too much pausing and interrupting. But when it comes down to evolving your opinion on certain issues, be it politics, religion, anything of that nature, we all adapt, we all change. Hey folks, at one point, I supported Bernie Sanders. At one point, I thought there was a pathway to reform the Democrat Party. At one point, I even agreed with Cenk Uygur about money in politics. And look, here's the thing. Yeah, we got to get money out of politics. I just thought he had more of a follow-through with Wolfpack. I was wrong about that, okay? And now there's Rebellion Pack. Let's see how that turns out. It'll probably end up the same way as Justice Democrats, okay? Because anyone that's been paying attention should know very well about Justice Democrats. And brand new Congress and our revolution and see that there's no reforming a political party. Just ask David Hogg and what's happening to him. So already right off the bat, you see what's happening. But it's important for you to change your opinion. You just can't be rock solid and just believe that, oh, well, this is how things are. You can't challenge it. Douglas Murray, I mean, come on. You kept, after that debate with Joe Rogan, well, Joe Rogan wasn't debating him, but, there was a debate between Dave Smith and, Douglas Murray. Joe Rogan was there in the middle on the Joe Rogan podcast. Douglas Murray was trying to do damage control because the internet is the final judge, the judge, jury, and executioner. So let's just look at this. The internet saw this and realized Douglas Murray had no idea what he was talking about.
I was pro-life. I was pro-choice at one point. God, this is bad. I was up for open borders.
Oh,
at one point.
I've had all of those views.
I've had some really bad views over the years, and I've changed my mind.
Do you think Douglas would admit if he was wrong?
Well, of course not. I mean, that's obvious,
so that's
right?
No, but that's kind of the acid
well, look,
test, right?
if you can get Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Libya, Ukraine, and COVID wrong, and then with certainty say you're right about the next one, and then also arguing that the other person should have some humility. I mean, come on. Like, what is this?
It's so good.
It's just you couldn't write. If I just scripted this for you and wrote it on a script, you'd be like, take it down. And this is too ridiculous. No one would believe this. But regardless of that, so there's two moments that actually really stood out to me in the debate. So number one was in the Ukraine portion. Number two was in the Israel portion. So in the Ukraine portion, at one point, I said to him, we were talking about the what led up to the war. And so he said something like, he goes, the real question is why all these countries wanted to join NATO. I mean, we didn't incorporate them in NATO through force. And I was like, well, yes, obviously that's the argument, isn't that we forced, the governments willingly wanted to join NATO.
Yes.
I was like, that's pretty obvious why. You'd want to be have your defense subsidized and want to have the most powerful government in the history of the world guaranteeing your defense. Sure. Yeah. And also because they're concerned about the former Soviet Union, which is still Russia. And okay. But I was like, but that wasn't the argument. The argument is, why would we do this? And so I was like, let me just give you two bullet points, right? Two quick arguments. And the two quick points that I made were, number one, the "niet means niet" memo, which, of course, as you know well, you've talked about this a lot. You talked about this back on your Fox News show, was that Bill Burns,
later director of the CIA, yes.
Yes, the CIA director through Joe Biden's 4 years,
yes,
who was the CIA director through this entire war up until Trump took back over.
But then the ambassador to Russia.
In 2008, he was the ambassador to Russia. He wrote a private cable to Condoleezza Rice. This was not for the public. This was a private cable that later the heroic Julian Assange released. It's the only reason we know it exists. And he lays out in there that all this talk about Ukrainian entry to NATO is going to lead to a war. And he specifically says,
and don't worry, that was never going to happen. We were never going to go to war, and trillions of dollars wouldn't be wasted in a conflict that would cost millions upon millions of lives. We would not see drones bombing soldiers from Ukraine or Russia. We would not see war crimes. We would not be seeing civilians, men, women, and children dying. We wouldn't see communities getting blown up. We wouldn't see abuse happening on the front lines. We wouldn't see mercenaries. We would not see weapons being sold on the black market. We would not hear that infamous story. Hey, look, hold on. We would not be even hearing that infamous story of an OnlyFans model getting a $200,000 watch from a Ukrainian MP. A deputy, to be more precise. You're not furious? I mean, heaven forbid, our politicians doing insider trading from 2022 to up until now, making a killing while this war is happening.
That this is the brightest of all red lines for the Russians. And if we keep moving forward, they fear this could result in civil war, and then they might have to intervene. In his words, quote, a choice the Russians do not want to have to make. So it's like, hey, there's a pretty compelling piece of evidence.
Yes.
And then number two, I said, Stoltenberg, I always say this name wrong, but the head of NATO, Stoltenberg, the head of NATO, he said that Vladimir Putin in late 2001 put in writing, sent a draft treaty to NATO and said, if you just put into writing that you will not bring Ukraine into NATO, I will not invade the country. This is the head of NATO. So I give him these 2 points, okay? I could talk a lot more about this, but I was like, let's focus on these 2. Seems to me that all the powerful people involved are admitting that this war was about Ukrainian entry into NATO. And his response was, the war was not about Ukrainian entry into NATO. It was about Vladimir Putin's desires to reconstitute the Soviet Union.
At the end of the day, it's not going to matter who wanted what. The ghosts of the dead will be talking about how frivolous and pointless this entire conflict was. It's not going to matter. The dried blood on the ground, the dead bodies strewn about, the survivors weeping in pain because their loved ones are gone, and the survivors of the front line, just because they may not have any injuries visible, inside mentally and emotionally, they're forever damaged. We're going to be forever haunted by the videos of, recruiters dragging men on the streets in Ukraine to go to the front line. We're going to be seeing imagery of so many people on both sides dying. And for what? What was it all about? It was a waste. And if we don't learn this lesson, then, I make this joke on the show, maybe we are at the season finale for planet Earth and humanity. Maybe this is our end. There were opportunities, so many opportunities for us to put aside our differences or step up against injustice. And I think maybe 2020 was that missed opportunity. So many of us were in fear because of the lockdowns. What did we give up? I want to say that we can perhaps recover, but we have politicians who are excited for war. India, Pakistan, China, Taiwan, the whole of the Middle East, Ukraine, and Russia. It didn't have to be this way.
And I was like, yeah, but what's the response? Like, what's the response to my point? Like, I made a point. You made nothing. You just made an assertion. So there was this one where it's like, once you actually get down to it, once you remove all this, like, you're an expert, you're not an expert, you've never been, what are you watering? What are the, you've got no actual argument here.
Because you're not an expert yourself.
Right. But even that, it's like that, again, just the way I work, that doesn't do anything for me. Then you got to have an actual argument. Otherwise, you're not going to persuade me. And I think for most of the
actual
viewers,
knowledge too.
Right.
I mean, I just refer back to the boarding school thing. It's like the whole point of that style in debating is to create the illusion of knowledge. Like,
well,
you have an Aeschylus quote, sort of, you know what I mean? Or you can cite the titles of 3 D.H. Lawrence novels, but you haven't read the novels. You haven't read Aeschylus. You don't actually have
it. You don't have an original thought that's actually yours.
But you don't even have the material. You haven't even read the books.
Right.
It's just it's a sleight of hand. And that's what they teach you in boarding school.
Well, so then the other one, which some people did pick up on this, but this to me was like actually the biggest moment of the debate, I thought. And it's sad in a way, because Douglas Murray is someone who I have some degree of respect for as a smart person. And it was kind of sad that he was reduced to this. But so he made the argument. He said, first off, he was dishonest. And I didn't call him, I know this, but I let it slide. But he goes, I was very iffy about the war in Libya. And it's like, I've read your columns at the time. No, you fucking weren't. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, but he goes, I was very iffy about the war in Libya, but the war in Libya was fought because there was this tremendous fear that Gaddafi was about to go genocidal, and it was a humanitarian intervention. And so then I said, okay.
Now they have slave markets in Tripoli.
Right.
It's humanitarian.
But even.
Yes, exactly. Open slave trade. To quote Hillary Clinton, we saw, he died, regarding to Gaddafi. And whatever your opinions are on Gaddafi, geez, at least under his watch, there was an open slave trade. I mean, there's no such thing as perfect, but my goodness, doesn't exist. But what the hell? What's going on here?
But forget even the point that, okay, maybe their argument is they thought he was going to go genocidal and they didn't realize it would be so much worse without him. Like what? But I said, okay, Douglas, so riddle me this then. if it was a humanitarian intervention, how come I have 4-star General Wesley Clark telling me 10 years prior that we had already made the plans to go overthrow Gaddafi? Because he said this very clearly to Amy Goodman on Democracy Now!
Mhm.
And then I mentioned that he later, actually very recently on Piers Morgan, he clarified. This is really interesting. If people go watch it, Scott Horton, who is amazing, by the way. His book Provoked is the best book on Russia-U.S. post-collapse of the Soviet Union relations. His book, Enough Already, is the best book that's been written on the terror wars. So Scott Horton is debating Wesley Clark on Piers Morgan. And this gets brought up. You know, the fact that you said in 2001, you had already seen in the Pentagon that we were going to overthrow 7 countries in 5 years. And okay. So he says, he goes, well, actually, the plans go back to 1991. And I saw them first from Paul Wolfowitz's office. And then basically the plans got killed. And then they were revived by Richard Pearl and a study paid for by the Israelis. This was 4-star General Wesley Clark's comments on it. So I brought that up. And I go, well, look, you're going to say that this is a humanitarian intervention, but that seems strange because the plans to overthrow Gaddafi were already written many years earlier. And then they had their opportunity and they did it. I think it was more than just a humanitarian intervention. And then his response is this thing about how Paul Wolfowitz's name starts with an animal and ends Jewish. And it was kind of funny the way he said it. But then he went, be careful what you're watering there.
And speaking of watering, look, again, I don't want to interrupt too much because I'm going to have my final opinion on all of this. Because when you look at somebody like Douglas Murray, who is an expert, and remember, corporate media relies on the experts so that all of you can consume it. Well, remember when I mentioned how a Ukrainian OnlyFans model admitted that a Ukrainian MP gave her a $200,000 watch? I mean, corporate media in the beginning of 2022 was saying that this war in Ukraine was a fight for democracy. Since then, what have we witnessed? And of course, Douglas Murray's going to be like, well, no, it's about this and stopping Putin and reconstituting the Soviet Union. I don't know. I beg to differ because there's been so many stories about mansions and property that are owned by high-ranking officials here. But hold on.
Тобі подарували годинник Рішар Міль за $200,000.
Да, это было.
Хто це був?
Поклонник, очень-очень самодостаточный, обеспеченный. Не мой молодой человек.
Чим він займається?
Политик.
Політик.
Да.
Український політик?
Да.
Він депутат?
Да.
Отак от, друзі, бачите, що корупційні гроші українських політиків, куди вони йдуть? Куди вони їх витрачають, ви запитаєте? На годинники для Альони Омович.
Да, грешна, каюсь.
Yeah. $200,000 for a watch. As for the cost, just the blood and the soul of people, as these politicians played a game of men killing each other. Isn't that what's war all about? That's what it is. It is the madness of war, man's inhumanity to man, the insensitivity to torture, the abuse, the insanity. We got a little bit more from this video here, just a little bit more. I won't play all of it, but just a little bit more, just a tiny bit more, okay? Just a tiny bit more, just a tiny bit more. I want to fast forward just maybe to, hold on. There you go. Let's play this.
So much Muslim immigration into the UK. Okay, well, someone could take that and that might lead to a rise in hatred of Muslim people. But that's not a counter argument.
No.
That's not an argument. That's like, well, okay, well, then maybe you could say you should also add in there, I don't mean all Jewish people are guilty of some conspiracy, but that, first of all, I'm Jewish and he's not. So like, what the hell are you talking about?
I wouldn't say you're Jewish. And that gets me to, I mean, I don't think you've convinced Douglas that you're Jewish. So
well, that's true.
I saw that and read the commentary after. And as someone who's always liked Douglas and known him for a while, my first instinct was, wow, he just destroyed his career. Like he's done. No smart person will ever take Douglas seriously again. And I don't know if he felt that way, but it was clear by a day or two after he realized he destroyed his career. And in response, rather than admitting that and admitting what he'd done wrong, he attacked you, really kind of doubled down in the New York Post. I want to read this because I was offended by this. He goes, the whole column's an attack on you, and I'm quoting, claiming some Jewish ancestry. Smith has spent the last 18 months since October 7th being very unfunny. Indeed. Claiming some Jewish ancestry. Now, I'm not really sure. Well, I'm just going to, I don't know why that just, oh.
Well,
So what, do you claim some Jewish ancestry?
My mom and dad are probably the big ones. I do claim some Jewish ancestry. But yeah, I mean, it was so, well, first of all, which I'm not even the first, because everyone made this joke already about the art, but he says, I haven't been funny. And Douglas has never been to one of my comedy shows. So he should come and check it out. And then he could tell me what he thinks. I think I'm pretty damn funny in my shows. And the audience seems to think so. But
what is your Jewish ancestry that you claim? I mean, first of all, he suggests that you're like a fake Jew.
Yeah.
Claiming some Jewish ancestry. It's like you're hiding behind a cloak of ersatz Judaism.
Which is, in a way, one of the things I thought was so interesting about the piece was that, and I couldn't imagine, man, I hope I'm never this person. Because even now, right, like there's so many shots I could take at Douglas. But even when you ask me about the debate, like my first instinct is to go like, well, look, here are the points I made that he didn't have counters to, because I'm about the argument, like that's what actually matters. And it's tough for all of us because there is, as you know well, you've talked a lot about this, right? But it's like, in this kind of show business news world where we're talking about events.
And the show business news world is so cutthroat. Oh, God. And I can't predict the future, how all this will play out. But, man, if you want to get involved in this media space and everything, just be prepared for Knives Out, because it is just an absolute fight. It is an absolute maze of insanity and red tape. No one's ever going to walk out in one piece. Everyone's going to get cut. And the thing is, there are a lot of people who want to hold on to it and think that they are the end-all, be-all experts, the end-all, be-all authority. And the thing is, what I encourage you, my audience, question every goddamn thing. Check out different sources of information. I've done collaborations with No Soundbites, Larry Sharp, Do Dissidents, INN, RBN, Jimmy Dore, everyone, Sabs, JB, Matt Weinglass, Craig, Jardula Pasta, much love to him, Nico House. And the thing is, each one of those groups, people, organizations, different opinions, different perspectives, but you have to be a well-rounded person to see everything from every point of view.
And things that matter, but also there's a camera on us and we're talking on a microphone, right, and we're public people, and so it's kind of impossible to completely remove your ego and your own narcissistic tendencies from that. But like, you got to keep reminding yourself, like, yeah, but there's a fucking war going on. Like, that's what actually matters.
I know.
All of this is much less important than like the actual policy. So you try to focus on that. But I could not imagine writing an article about a debate that I had just been in, where the reaction was so unfavorable toward me. And in the piece, what you might notice is he does not take on a single one of my arguments. He does not point out something that I got wrong. He does not say, Dave argued this, but this is so clearly a reflection of his lack of knowledge on this subject because he didn't account for X, Y, and Z. It's just, just like the actual debate, he would only debate me. He wouldn't debate the topic.
We're always looking for cool.
Now we're going to stop there. We're going to stop there because that's a little commercial from Tucker Carlson, right? What's the takeaway? And I'm glad we stopped there, was the ego. When it comes down to this media space, I think we're all, especially a lot of us in independent media, we try our best. I try my best to keep my ego in check, but there's always, that point to where, hey, did I get something wrong? I have to apologize, or, hey, I got this wrong. I better state something, or, hey, there's a mistake here. Let me correct it. I think at the aftermath of the Douglas and Murray debate, for what I learned from it is that the experts can get things wrong. I mean, we've seen it before in media. All of you have seen it. You don't need me to tell you that. You have seen the experts fail in whatever field. Yes. All right. Now, the thing is, we've also seen people who are not experts actually point out something and then later on be vindicated. All right. It's important to be well-rounded. It's important that when you have this kind of media space here, to have that slice of humble pie. Now I can't predict how things will play out, especially as the internet becomes more interconnected, as technology becomes interwoven into our entire system. But the Democrats, the Republicans, corporate media, it's all about having a narrative, and they all want to have their own people in charge. But the thing is, they're losing their grasp and their power. And Dave Smith with Douglas Murray was, I would say, maybe not the final stone throw, but maybe a crack in the glass, a crack in the blade. Challenge everything. And that also goes for also looking at people who have different opinions. And that's why I'm glad to collaborate with different people and call them allies, but also hear their side and perspective. Now, I don't believe the whole change my mind, but okay, I see where you're coming from. That's what I believe in. And until then, it's about challenging. And if you get something wrong, admit it. That's it.